On November 14, 2025, inside the heavily fortified walls of Broad River Correctional Institution in South Carolina, a 41-year-old man who had once terrorized an entire community finally faced the punishment the state had waited nearly 2 decades to carry out. After 17 years, 1 month, and 1 day on death row, Stephen Corey Bryant was executed by firing squad, becoming one of the rare individuals in modern U.S. history to die by that method. This is the story of the crimes that sealed his fate, the final appeals that failed, and what happened in the final hours before he died. The beginning of a rampage. In early October 2004, 23-year-old Stephen Corey Bryant seemed like any other young man in rural Sumter County. He liked fishing, spent weekends near the river, and worked casual jobs. But beneath that ordinary exterior was a darkness no one in his small community had ever suspected. On the night of October 8, 2004, Bryant approached the river where he often fished. Another man, 56-year-old Clinton Brown, was already there, quietly casting his line. For reasons investigators could never fully explain, Bryant suddenly raised a stolen firearm and shot Brown in the back. Brown miraculously survived. Bleeding, barely conscious, he dragged himself into his truck and drove to a hospital. But that random act of violence was just the beginning. What followed would become one of the most disturbing 8-day crime sprees in South Carolina's history. A friend betrayed. The next day, October 9th, Bryant met up with a longtime friend and coworker, 36-year-old Cliff Gay. The two men had fished together, shared drinks, visited each other's homes. Gay trusted him completely, but as they drove through a rural backroad supposedly to pick up beer, Bryant pulled out the same stolen gun and shot his friend point blank in the head. He left Gay's body on the roadside and drove away as if nothing had happened. Investigators later said this kill. Bryant wasn't acting out of panic, anger, or even revenge. He was killing for the thrill. The home invasion that changed everything. 2 days later, on October 11th, Bryant selected a completely random victim, a 62-year-old man named Willard Teachin who lived alone in a remote part of the county. Bryant knocked on the door, pretending his car had broken down. Teachin, like many rural Southerners, offered help. The moment he opened the door, Bryant forced his way in and shot him, not once or twice, but 9 times. The brutality didn't stop there. In behavior prosecutors later described as pure sadism, Bryant burned the victim's eyes with lit cigarettes, ransacked the home, and took jewelry, tools, and anything else he could carry. Then something happened that still haunts investigators. While Bryant was still inside the house, the phone began to ring. It was Teachin's daughter, Kimberly, calling from another state. No one answered the first time. On her second attempt, the call was picked up. "Who is this?" a man's voice asked. Kimberly responded, "I'm Willard's daughter." The voice replied with a sentence that froze her blood. "You can't talk to him. I'm the prowler." And then, in a tone witnesses later described as mocking and emotionless, he confessed, "I killed him 3 hours ago." He laughed, a cold, sharp laugh, and hung up. Later, when investigators searched the home, they found messages written on the wall in Teachin's blood. Victim 4 in 2 weeks. Catch me if you can. Candles surrounded the body like a ritualistic display. Detectives called it one of the most disturbing crime scenes they had ever seen. The final victim. 2 days later, on October 13th, Bryant walked into a rural convenience store where he ran into 35-year-old Christopher Burgess, a man he knew casually. They talked. They laughed. Everything seemed normal. Bryant offered him a ride. Burgess accepted. Minutes later, along a lonely stretch of R. Bryant shot him twice, once in the head, once in the chest, and dumped his body in a ditch. A hunter discovered the body less than 2 hours later. Police were alerted, roadblocks were set up, and by that evening, Bryant was captured at his girlfriend's house without resistance. Inside the home, detectives found stolen guns, items from the victims' homes, and clothing witnesses had described. The evidence was overwhelming, the charges and the violence in jail. On October 14, 2004, Bryant was charged with 3 counts of murder. 2 counts of aggravated burglary, armed robbery, unlawful firearm possession, arson, plus nearly a dozen additional charges related to theft and property destruction. But even in custody, his violence didn't stop. In October 2005, he attacked a correctional officer at the detention center, beating him even after the officer was already on the ground. Prosecutors said this incident showed Bryant had no remorse and no hesitation when it came to violence. The trial and the death penalty. On September 2, 2008, Bryant's sentencing phase began. His defense team argued he had grown up in a traumatic, abusive environment and that the state had failed him long before he failed society. They asked for mercy, but the prosecution focused on the brutality of his crimes, the torture, the blood messages, the phone call to a victim's daughter, and the cold, calculated nature of every killing. On September 11, 2008, the jury delivered its decision. Stephen Corey Bryant was sentenced to death. He received the death penalty for the murder of Willard Teachin, life sentences for murders of Clifton Gay and Christopher Burgess, almost 100 additional years for his other crimes, 17 years of appeals. Over the next 17 years, Bryant's lawyers, many publicly opposed to the death penalty, filed appeal after appeal. They argued mental illness, legal missteps, constitutional concern. But every appeal failed. On October 14, 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected his final request for review. There were no more appeals. South Carolina's Attorney General filed for an execution date. The court scheduled it for November 14, 2025. 2 weeks before the execution, Bryant was formally given the choice of method: lethal injection or firing squad. He chose the firing squad. He became the third person in the state to select that method since executions resumed in 2024. His final days. Bryant spent his last 2 weeks mostly in isolation. No family visited him. His only regular visitor was a spiritual advisor. Inmates often request extravagant final meals. Bryant did not. Records show he declined a special meal entirely. The execution. November 14, 2025, execution day, 4 a.m. Bryant woke up, showered, and met with his spiritual counselor. As protocol requires, he was given sedatives to reduce physical panic during the procedure. 5:45 p.m., he was escorted to the chamber. 5:50 p.m., he was strapped into the chair with leather restraints. A target was placed over his heart. A black hood was secured over his head. Witnesses entered behind bulletproof glass. No last words were offered. At 6:10 p.m., 3 shooters fired .308 caliber rifles. All rounds hit his torso. Doctors said neurological death likely occurred within seconds. At 6:20 p.m., he was pronounced dead. After 17 years of appeals, 8 days of terror, and 4 victims whose families still carry the scars, the state of South Carolina closed the case of Stephen Corey Bryant. Ending questions. Was this execution justice? Did the punishment fit the crime? Or should the death penalty itself be questioned? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.